Luis van Aan is someone that doesn't need much of an introduction, but I'm sure, first of all, you've taken part in his crowdsourcing project, CAPTCHA, at some point in your lives, whether you've enjoyed that or not, typing in different codes and stuff. He is also the co-founder and CEO of Duolingo. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the stage Luis van Aan.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Yes, okay, good. Okay, so I want to start by asking you guys a question. How many of you have had to fill out some sort of form where you've been asked to read this distorted sequence of characters like that? Great. How many of you found it really, really annoying? Excellent. Okay, so I invented that. That thing is called a CAPTCHA, and the reason is there is to make sure that you, the entity filling out the form, are actually a human and not a computer program that was written to submit the form millions of times. And the reason it works is because humans can read these distorted characters better than computers. So for example, in the case of Ticketmaster, the reason you have to type these is to prevent ticket scalpers from writing a program that can buy millions of tickets two at a time. Now, I helped invent this about 16 years ago, and it turns out it started being used by every single website in the world, basically. And about 5 years afterwards, I did a little calculation about how many times somebody had to type these throughout the day. And it turns out that about 200 million times a day, somebody types a CAPTCHA. Now, when I first heard this number, I was very proud of myself. I thought, look at the impact that my work has had. But then I started feeling bad, because the thing is, not only are these annoying, but also each time you type one of these, you waste about 10 seconds of your time. And if you multiply 10 seconds by 200 million, you get that humanity as a whole is wasting about 500,000 hours every day typing these annoying CAPTCHAs because of me. So I started feeling bad, and I started thinking, is there any way in which we can use this effort for something that is good for humanity? See, the thing is, during those 10 seconds while you're typing a CAPTCHA, your brain is doing something amazing. Your brain is doing something that computers cannot yet do very well. So the question is, can we get you to do something useful? And the answer to that was yes, and this is what we started doing after with a project called ReCAPTCHA, where the idea is that while you're typing a CAPTCHA, not only are you authenticating yourself as a human, but you would also be helping us to digitize books. So let me explain roughly how that works. So there's a lot of projects out there trying to digitize books. So Google is trying to digitize all of the world's books, but there's many others. And the basic idea is you start with a physical book, and then you scan it. Now, scanning a book literally consists of taking a photograph, a digital photograph of every page of the book. So you basically are left with an image for every page of the book, and these are images of text. The next step in the process is that the computer needs to be able to decipher all of the words in these pictures. That's done using a technology called OCR, for optical character recognition. The problem with OCR is that it's not perfect, especially for older books. About 30% of the words the computer just cannot recognize, but humans can. So what we started doing is we started taking all of the words that the computer could not recognize, and we started getting people to read them for us while they type a CAPTCHA on the internet. Okay, so next time you type a CAPTCHA, basically those words that you're typing are actually words that are coming from books that are being digitized that the computer could not recognize. And we're using what you're entering to help us recognize that. The reason there are now 2 words instead of 1, there's a good reason for that, and it's because, see, you may be wondering, wait a second, if the computer just got a word out of a book, it doesn't know what the word actually is. So how is it that when you type the answer, it can tell you whether you're correct or not? How does it know whether you typed the correct answer or not? That's why we have 2 words. See, for one of the words, that's a word for which the computer already knows the answer. It already figured out the answer, whereas the other word is a brand new word from a book. And then we just give it to the user, and we say, please type both, and we don't tell them which one's which. And if you type the correct word for the one for which we already knew the answer, we assume that you're a human, and we also get some confidence that you typed the other word correctly. And if we repeat this process to like 10 different people, and all 10 different people agree on what the new word is, then we get one more word digitized with very high accuracy. So this process is working out very well. We are currently, this was actually turned into a company. It got acquired by Google, and then we're helping to digitize, or this is helping to digitize about 100 million words a day, which is the equivalent of about 2 million books a year, all being typed 1 word at a time by just people on the internet. Now, since we're doing so many words per day, and since we're now showing 2 randomly chosen English words right next to each other, funny things can happen. So let me show you some of the things that have happened. So for example, we presented this word. It's the word Christians. There's nothing wrong with it by itself. But if you put it along with another randomly chosen word, bad things can happen. So we showed this. It's not very good. But it turns out the particular, so ReCAPTCHA was used by millions of websites. It turns out that the particular website that presented this was something called the Embassy of the Kingdom of God. Oops. Here's another really bad one. This is a politician from the United States, johnedwards.com. And there's not much we can do about this because, see, for one of the words, the computer just doesn't know what it is, so it's not like we can filter this out very well. Let me tell you about the actual thing that I'm here to talk about, which is the next project that I worked on, which is a company called Duolingo. I started Duolingo right after Google bought ReCAPTCHA. I was in a very fortunate position in my life. Google had bought my second company, and I decided that I wanted to work on a project that was more about my passion rather than about making money. And my true passion is education. So I wanted to work on something related to education. Now, my views on education are very related to where I'm from. I am from Guatemala. This is a public service announcement. That is where Guatemala is. And that's also very important. This is not where they keep the prisoners. That is called Guantanamo. That's not the same. Now, Guatemala is a very poor country. And a lot of people talk about education as something that can bring equality to different social classes. But I always saw it as the complete opposite. I always saw it as something that brings inequality, because what happens, especially in poor countries like Guatemala that don't have a very good public school system, what happens is that the people who have a lot of money can buy themselves the best education in the world, and because of that, they continue having a lot of money. Whereas people who don't have very much money barely learn how to read and write, and because of that, they never make a lot of money. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to do something related to education that would give equal access to everybody, regardless of whether they had money or not. And now education is very general, so I decided to work on one type of education which happens to be very big, and it is learning a foreign language. So there's about 1.2 billion people in the world learning a foreign language. It's very big everywhere in the world except for the United States. People in the United States are not learning other languages. But in the world, there's 1.2 billion people learning a foreign language. Now, this is a very strange market. The majority of these people, 800 million of them, satisfy 3 properties. First, they're learning English. Second, the reason they're learning English is in order to get a job. And third, they are of low socioeconomic conditions. Okay, so most people that are trying to learn a foreign language are trying to learn English in order to get out of poverty. Now, at the same time, especially before we launched Duolingo, most of the ways there were to learn a foreign language were very expensive. For example, in the United States, there's this thing called Rosetta Stone. It costs between $500 and $1,000. In other countries in the world, there was a software called Open English, which costs about $1,000. So the irony of it all was that it seemed that most people were trying to learn a language to get out of poverty, but in order to get out of poverty, you needed $1,000. So that did not make much sense. So what we did is we launched Duolingo about 4 years ago, and it was a completely free way to learn languages. First, we launched it as a website, then we made it an iPhone app, then an Android app, then a Windows app, and it's basically available everywhere. And we launched it about 4 years ago, and today Duolingo is the most popular way to learn languages in the world. There are more people learning languages on Duolingo in the United States than there are people learning languages in the whole US public school system. There's also other funny stories. I mean, for example, we teach Irish. I didn't actually know Irish was a language. I thought they spoke English, and yeah, mainly they do, but there's a language called Irish. There's 94,000 native speakers of Irish. On Duolingo, there are 1 million people learning Irish. So we have the chance of actually improving this quite a bit. Now, what makes me the proudest, ever since we launched Duolingo, since we launched it, what makes me the proudest is there are entire countries, like for example Colombia, they're developing countries, Colombia or Costa Rica, where all of their public schools that are connected to the internet are using Duolingo to help teach English to their students. Now, if you're a student in a public school in a developing country, that means you really do not have very much money. Because in a developing country, when you have some money, you go to a private school. So people use Duolingo in public schools to learn languages. And at the same time, on the other end of the spectrum, Bill Gates uses Duolingo to learn French. And to me, this juxtaposition is what makes me the proudest. Basically that the richest man in the world uses the same exact system to learn a language as people in public schools in developing countries means that more money cannot buy you a better education. And this is what we wanted to do with Duolingo. Now, people really like Duolingo. There's a lot of things that they say. For example, these are some of the things that people have said. So this person said, in the past 2 days, they've learned more from Duolingo than in 4 years of high school. Of course, I think that says more about high school than about Duolingo. It's 4 years. Or there's this other person. That was my mother. She likes it a lot. Now, the reason that people like Duolingo so much, we've been able to grow a lot. We've never actually advertised. All the growth has been through word of mouth. And the reason that people like it so much is that we've spent a lot of effort making it feel like you're playing a game while you're using it, while you're learning. So the hardest thing about learning a language or learning anything by yourself is keeping yourself motivated. So we spent a lot of effort making it feel like you're playing a game. So this is what our iPhone app actually used to look like. The way it works is that the way you learn any language in Duolingo is that we split up languages into multiple units that we call skills. So for example, plurals is a skill. That's where you learn how to pluralize. Or animals is a skill. That's where you learn all the animal names. And the idea is that at the beginning you only have one skill open. And then when you complete that skill, you unlock other skills. So basically there's this unlocking mechanism that is very game-like. And inside the skills, the idea is that you're taking each lesson just has very short exercises. And in each exercise, you're always doing something very active. You're either translating something or picking an image that is related to the word or speaking to the app and it tells you whether you said it correctly or not through voice recognition. And so you're always doing something active in these little exercises. And when you get something correct, there is this progress bar at the top. It goes up when you get something correct. And when you get something wrong, it goes down. Now, we've actually spent quite a bit of effort even on optimizing this progress bar. So for example, whenever you get something correct that was very difficult, it goes up more than if you get something correct that was very easy. And also, if you get something wrong that was very difficult, it doesn't go down very much because anyways, we expected you to get it wrong. And so we spend a lot of effort actually optimizing this progress bar, and we've even optimized everything in this screen to make it as addictive as possible. Some of the things that we've done. So, for example, this is just an example of how our screen has changed over the years. I don't have from the beginning, but this is one of the changes. Duolingo used to look like the screen on the left, and we changed it to the screen on the right. The big difference is the screen on the left. The way it worked is every lesson. It used to be that every lesson had 20 exercises, and then there were these 3 hearts there. And whenever you got an exercise wrong, you would lose a heart. And if you got 3 exercises wrong, you basically lost all your lives and you had to start over. That was the gaming mechanism. Then we actually switched it to this progress bar that goes up and down. And of course, everything we do, we measure. So we did A/B tests to do that. And we tested this, and the progress bar got people to do about 3 or 4% more lessons rather than losing your lives. So this is one of the examples of some of the things we've done. Let me show you actually. This is a feature that we have not yet released, and I'm going to show you some of our development process. So when we're working on a new feature, the first thing we do, we make sketches, we design it, etc. Once we've implemented, though, we spend a lot of effort doing user tests, where we bring in random people from the streets and record them using our app. And the first time this usually happens, whenever we show them the first version of something that we do, it's very bad. They don't understand. We think that we just made the most beautiful thing in the world, and then the user just doesn't understand anything. Let me show you something that's in the middle of development. We haven't quite launched it yet. This is our new way in which we're going to teach conversation on Duolingo. We're actually going to start teaching conversation on Duolingo using a chatbot, an artificial intelligence chatbot. So what I'm going to show you now is one of these user testing videos. You will see there are some glitches, but this is one of the user testing videos just so you can see how we do the development process. Hopefully this works with audio. Okay, let's see.
Tap on the tile, welcome aboard, and try to have a texting conversation in French. Complete the conversation, explaining any confusion you may have along the way.
That's the user talking themselves.
So let's start this. Objective, read new friends and learn about what they like. Bonjour. The extent of my French knowledge is like grade 9.
Comment ça va?
Oh, that's cool. So, does it do it for each word if I explain? That's very cool. This is actually a lot.
Parlons un peu en français.
This is actually a lot easier. I used to use
Je
this app,
voudrais
but
te présenter mes
I never
amis.
saw this feature.
Tout d'abord, Robert.
Okay.
Tu peux lui dire bonjour.
So, excellent. You speak or I speak. Let's talk in a little bit of French. I really like this feature. This is actually super helpful to learn this. I'd like to present your friends. Welcome aboard, Robert. You can... Oh, you can say hello to him. See, a lot of this I kind of remember, but having this feature to pull up certain words is super convenient.
Robert est occupé. Il mange. Que mange
So
Robert?
he's busy, he's eating. What's Robert eating? Ooh. I don't know how to say pizza.
It's not that hard.
Can I just, is it the same?
Bravo. Robert adore la pizza.
Yeah, I shouldn't have done that.
Il est chef
That's actually
dans un
super convenient
restaurant.
too.
Et maintenant, voici Gabrielle. Elle est chauffeuse de taxi. Dis-lui salut.
See, I like that it speaks to you as well, so you're actually learning both the conversational stuff and the text.
It goes on. These go on forever, and we spend a lot of time watching these. And this is one of the ways in which we've made Duolingo so smooth. We just watch people use it a lot. And the one that I showed you was towards the later end of the development process. At the very beginning, they cannot understand anything. And so we just try to improve the UI a lot. And this is also, by the way, this is our new feature that is not yet out. But basically, you're going to be able to learn conversation through an artificial intelligence chatbot. Now, when we started Duolingo, it was me and my co-founder, Severin, who's from Switzerland. Neither of us knew anything about how to teach languages. So what we did is we're both engineers. So what we did is we went to read a bunch of books on how to best teach languages. And we were reading a lot of books. At some point, he found a book that really seemed great. It was something, the title was something like The Best Method to Learn a Language. And we read it. It had all kinds of scientific evidence about why this was the particular best method to learn a language. And then we thought, OK, we're done. All we have to do is take this method and turn it into an app. And then that's going to be the best way to learn languages. Unfortunately, we kept on looking at other books. And then we found yet another book that claimed to be the best method to learn a language. And it also had a lot of scientific evidence backing it up. But unfortunately, it was completely different than the first method. And then we were confused because we didn't know what was the best method to learn languages. And when we started really finding out that actually most of the scientific community did not know the answer to very simple questions that we had. For example, we wanted to know something as simple as, should you teach plurals before adjectives? It's a very simple question. You may want to know the answer to that. It turns out there was no agreement on this among the scientific community. So what we did is we took what we could out of the books, and then we launched Duolingo at first. And now, once it started growing, we found ourselves in a very fortunate position. We found that we could actually answer a lot of these questions that we had by ourselves using our own data. So for example, if we want to know now whether we should teach plurals before adjectives or adjectives before plurals, we just do an experiment where basically for the next 50,000 people that sign up, to half of them we teach them plurals before adjectives, to the other half we teach them adjectives before plurals, and then we measure which ones learn better. And then we can know once and for all which of the two methods is better. And then we start doing it like that for all of our users. And every week we are doing a lot of these experiments. At any one time, we're probably running about 30 or 40 of these tests. That is basically Duolingo is trying to get better. So literally every week, Duolingo is better over time. Now, it used to be the case that a lot of these tests were done by hand, as in we had to come up with the hypotheses of what is better than not. But by now, some of these tests are actually being done automatically. So the computer is, in fact, getting better at teaching the more that people use it. And this has led to really much better educational outcomes. So for example, I like this study. This is a study that was done by somebody outside of Duolingo, by the City University of New York. They found that if you use Duolingo for 34 hours, you learn the equivalent of a one-semester course of the university, which usually takes a lot longer than 34 hours. And that's because we've been able to optimize teaching so much. Now, because we have so many users, we can start seeing all kinds of interesting data. For example, our data team just, this is a map of the world based on what is the most common language learned in that country. We have a lot of data about this. There's some interesting things. You can see there are some countries where German is the most commonly learned language. Of course, you can see that English is the most commonly learned language in most countries in the world. There's an interesting one. Swedes, they're learning Swedish, which is funny. That's the most commonly learned language in Sweden. At first, we thought that was funny, but then we started realizing why that was. And it's because of a lot of the refugees. It turns out that in Sweden, our course to learn Swedish from Arabic is the most popular course in Sweden. And we're starting to see that in Europe more and more, where people are basically learning the language of the country, and it's usually people whose native language is Arabic. So we're starting to see these types of things. Now, speaking of English, you can see most of the world's trying to learn English. That's the main language that people are trying to learn. And that brings me to the next thing that's the last thing I want to talk about. And it is a project that we started about maybe 2 years ago. And it started from some emails that we started getting. It was a very common email that we would get. A lot of our users would say things, particularly people who are learning English. They would say things like, hey, thank you for teaching me English for free. I was not able to afford it before, but now I can. I'm learning English with you guys. That's great. But now I have a problem, and it is that I need to certify that I know English because my job is asking for it, or because I'm applying to be admitted at some university in the United States or something. I need to certify that I know English. Can you give me a certificate that I learn English? And so what we did is we started looking at the English language certification market, and what we found was crazy. First of all, I didn't know this, about $10 billion a year are spent by people certifying that they know English. They need to certify it if they're applying to go to the university in English-speaking countries. They need to certify that they know English if they're applying for a work visa anywhere in the UK. Or if they're working for many multinational corporations, they need to take these standardized tests. So one of them is the TOEFL, another one is called the IELTS, another one is the Cambridge English test. And basically, all of these tests, the way they work is you have to pay about $250 to take this test. You also have to go to a testing center to take it. And the whole process takes several weeks until you get your score. Now, this sounds annoying, because it is, but it's even worse because most of the people that are trying to take these tests are in developing countries. There, it's way more than annoying. $250 is a month's salary. The testing centers are not in every city, so what happens is that people need to travel to those cities to take the tests. So in order to certify that you know English right now, you need to pay a month's salary, you need to travel, it ends up costing a lot more, and the whole process takes several weeks. We thought we could do a lot better, so about a year and a half ago or so, we launched our own English language certification program called the Duolingo English Test. And the idea is that you can take a test from your own mobile device or from your own computer. We wanted to make the test free. Now, we couldn't actually make it free because I'll tell you why. But our test costs $50 as opposed to $250, and you can take it from any mobile device. Now, one of the hardest problems to solve with this, or one of the reasons why these test centers exist when you have to take the test, is to prevent cheating. We have to, the test needs to make sure that you are who you say you are, and also that you're not, you didn't show up with your laptop and are Googling every answer. And so how do we prevent cheating with our own test when you can take it from your own home? The way we prevent cheating is we actually turn on the front-facing camera of your phone and also your microphone, and we record you taking the test. And we just watch you taking the test, and then a real human watches you take the test. And this is why the test cannot be free, and basically we have to pay somebody to watch you take the test. But that's the basic way, and we prevent cheating quite a bit. About 7% of the people who take our test are trying to cheat. It's very funny to watch people trying to cheat. They think they are getting away with it, but they're not. And I'll tell you exactly what cheating looks like. It looks like this. That's what cheating, they're just basically reading somewhere else. We've found all kinds of very interesting mechanisms for people cheating. We happen to listen to their ambient noise, and we can tell when somebody else is whispering answers to them. We see that. But in the end, it's very difficult to cheat. It's also the case that one thing that makes it harder to cheat with our test is at the end of our test, not only, it's a test that's very similar to the TOEFL. You basically have to answer all kinds of questions, and at the end we give you a score. But at the end, there's also a 5-minute video recorded interview, because since we're anyways already watching you take the test, we decided to do a 5-minute video recording interview, which we attach to your score. So anybody who can see your score can also see you speaking for about 5 minutes. That's very difficult to cheat on. But basically, sorry, basically this is how it's working, and we're getting a lot of traction. We're starting to, there's some universities in the United States, for example, some departments of Harvard are already starting to accept this test. And the hope is that in a few years, this will become the main way to certify that you know a language. So that's what we're hoping for. But anyways, that's all I wanted to tell you about Duolingo. So if you want to see more, duolingo.com, and thank you very much.
Can you hear me now? Well, I'll shout if you can't hear me. We'll just go for a couple of questions. So does anybody have any questions about Duolingo, any of the things Louis is working on? Down here?
Yes, there is development for simplification in other languages. It's not going to be super fast, and the market for that is much, much, much smaller. But we are going to do a French and Spanish likely next. But the market, it really is like 1% the size of the English market for that.
Just over on the left.
Have you thought about opening this platform for other educational systems, like make it open source so people can use this for other types of education?
Yeah, we've thought about that. We haven't. We actually, the main reason we haven't done it is mainly we just haven't had the time to make it, turning something into open source is not as simple as just like, here's our code. We just haven't had the time to do that. But it's something, one thing that we've actually thought about is, rather than open sourcing, we probably are going to try to do some sort of API type thing where we let people do, teach other things. That may happen.
Wait a second for a mic, so the other people hear.
Hi, I'm using Duolingo to learn Dutch. And,
Awesome.
I don't see any ads in the app. I'm just curious, how do you guys make money?
Yes. It's called venture capital. It's a Ponzi scheme. It's really great. No, I'm kidding. No, there's a few ways. First of all, we do make money off of the English test. So that's one way. Now we're also starting to investigate all kinds of ways. So our main mission is to keep education for free. That's it. But that doesn't mean we can't charge for anything. So for example, we're starting to test all kinds of things. On the iPhone app, this is only on iPhone, there's a notion of a streak, that if you use Duolingo many days in a row, you have the streak. So for example, if you used it 4 days in a row, you have a 4-day streak, or 5 days, you have a 5-day streak, etc. If you don't use it one day, you lose your streak. Now, people really care about this streak. Once it's a long streak, once it's longer than like 20 days, people really care about it. And what started happening is we started getting a lot of emails of people saying, I had a 50-day streak, I lost it, I'm sorry, I had to go on vacation. Can you give it back to me? I'm willing to pay you. So we took him up on the offer. So what happens now on the iPhone app is that on the day you lose your streak, only on that day, the day right after you lose your streak, it says, hey, would you like to repair your streak? And if you want to repair your streak, you have to pay us about $5. It doesn't cost all that much. About 16% to 17% of the people who we offer that to actually buy. So we're making quite a bit of money off of that little thing that doesn't. So we're not selling education. We're just doing, it's a little game mechanic that we're doing that. We're probably going to go investigate that a lot more. We don't have any real plans to have ads. We've done an experiment with ads where we've actually tested how much money we could make off of ads just to know and to keep our investors happy. It turns out that if we put an ad at the end of every lesson, actually no, we put an ad at the end of the first lesson that you do per day. So just one ad per day, we can break even. So that with ads only. So, but we're not doing that. We don't have any real plans. That's just a measurement that we did. Yes.
Moves to last question down here.
I saw your TED Talk some years ago, and you talked about translating the web with Duolingo. What about that project?
Yeah, that's what we launched Duolingo with. That was our original business model. The idea was that you were going to help translate. And it's a pretty clever idea. The idea is that while you're learning a language, you could be helping to translate stuff, and we would be paid for translations. We got some customers for that. So for example, CNN is our customer still to this day, where they write all of their news in English. Then some of the people who are learning English on Duolingo are helping to translate CNN to other languages. You can do that only on the website, not on the apps. We have moved away from that for one main reason. We noticed that we were spending a lot of our time turning into a translations company, and that's not the company we wanted to do. We wanted to do an education company. So we decided it works, but we decided to put it on hold because we want to concentrate really on education.
Go on then, we'll do one more. Quick one.
Follow on to that. So, my question, you kind of answered it. My question is, how soon before I can wear technology on my body or whatever the IO interface is, and I can walk into a market in China and kind of, at least, get through a conversation, and do you embrace that technology, or is it competition? You kind of already said but anyway, let me hear.
I wouldn't say it's competition. I mean, I don't know how long it'll take. There's some very primitive things already. I don't know how long it'll take. I don't really see it as competition. I think over time people are just going to want to continue learning languages. For example, we still teach math, arithmetic, and there's no real need. You could just use a calculator. So I think that's for a long time that's going to be happening. We are spending our own effort on that, on trying to get to something that can help you communicate. But yeah, I don't see it as major competition for now.
Okay, great. Luis van Aan.